Welcome back, conscious listeners. I am so thrilled to bring on this special guest today. His name is Nick Fruth, and he is full of wisdom and full of gems. And he's here to share his story today and just anything else that pops up. And Nick, I'm so glad you're here to join.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you today.
Totally. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and your passions. That's kind of a lot.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great questions. Background, well, I was born in Boulder, Colorado, and pretty much from the beginning of my life, I struggled with a lot of things, and I didn't really understand why. Like I wet the bed until I was like 10 years old. I was terrified to sleep by myself, so I would basically scream until my parents let me sleep in their room by them. And then I hated taking showers, brushing my teeth. I was really sensitive to like clothing, all of those things. And struggled with a lot of like physical things, being present in school, just yeah, a lot of stuff like that. And so I always, even before I was consciously doing it, I was always kind of curious, like what was going on with me? Why was that different? My sister was actually a really major contrast to me as well. She was really present, really active in the world. So that also kind of fueled the questioning in me. Um, and so eventually, like once I got into high school and I found drugs, I realized that that was a way that could make me feel more like I thought I was supposed to. So it just started with smoking marijuana, but then eventually moved on to heroin, cocaine, benzos, mixing lots of different things together. Um, yeah, so once it got to a certain point, I pretty much just tried to be high all the time. And that was the most normal I could feel. But up until then, like I remember having challenges in school, like making friends and feeling kind of awkward and shy. But I don't really remember having any conscious consideration of thinking that my life was a really big burden or feeling really bad all the time. I think I had just kind of overlooked that part. But definitely as soon as I found drugs, it was like the way that I felt life should feel like, at least the closest to it. I knew on some level that it wasn't a real solution, but it was the best that I had basically. Um, and so yeah, I definitely spent a long time in my life using drugs, especially with like heroin, benzos, stuff like that. I had to have them in my system or I couldn't function. It was just too unbearable. Uh, and then eventually it got to the point where I realized how dysfunctional I was in. I realized how dysfunctional I was physically, and I think about to be 25 at that point. I dropped out of school because, like, dropped out of college. I had started going back because I was in a relationship with this girl, and kind of, I thought I was going to maybe salvage what I thought life was about at that point. And the relationship ended poorly. I couldn't function in school, and so that's kind of when the reality of my situation hit me, and I really finally realized and embraced how challenging of a situation I was in. I tried a lot of therapy, AA, stuff like that in the past to know that it wasn't going to provide the solution that I needed to move forward with my life. And so at that point, I was the only solution I could think of was to overdose. I didn't really want to die, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know where else to go. And so I tried to overdose on cocaine. It didn't work, luckily. And then I got put in a 72-hour hold, um, got out, and then was sober except for smoking cigarettes. And within a couple of weeks of getting out, that's when I really started to actually, for the first time in my life, experience my essence, like who I really was outside of all of the challenges I'd faced in my life, all of the things I thought about myself, the ways I thought life worked. It was really this feeling of completeness, love, brilliance. Uh, the second it started happening, I knew it was who I really was. It's the only time ever in my life up until that point I actually felt that way. Um, and so that basically changed everything for me forever. I started realizing like, man, this is what life is supposed to feel like. I knew it instantly when it started happening. Um, and then I started really seeing like future possibilities of what my life could be, what I could do. But most importantly, it was the state of being. And now looking back on it, I see how I was searching for that through drugs. Like they would give you bits and pieces, but it was nothing like that. You know, you could never feel that completeness with drugs. It was just kind of um, I don't know, the closest I could get with the level of stuff that I was dealing with. And so from that point forward, I really was trying to figure out, okay, what was happening? How do I get to that state of being? How do I live from that place? Like, how do I really become that version of myself? Um, and I tried yoga, worked with different healers. I was really trying everything, um, in an alternative sense, because I knew that that was really the path for it. That's where I would, hear people talking about things that resonated with me. Um, but still, for a long time, I really didn't know how to exist physically. I kind of left myself behind and I just kept trying to like escape to that space, just the same way I was using drugs. And so it was really challenging for me to still address what was going on with me physically. And I think still a big part of that as well was, insecurities, kind of not being willing to integrate and accept where I was at in my life on a physical level. But eventually it got to the point where I got frustrated enough and I wasn't moving forward. And so that's when I really had to start to come into my body and to address all of the things that are going on there, which was pretty painful at first. I think that that was actually a pattern that started as a kid also, which is why I didn't like things like showers, um, or anything that really pulled me into my body, is that it just was a really uncomfortable place to be. And I never thought about it that way, but managed to find, TV, all of those things before I discovered drugs, and then drugs, which really helped me to escape enough that I didn't even have to embrace that. Um, but yeah, eventually it got to the point that I started to realize that I had to come into my body, and that was really the only avenue to get to where I wanted to go. Um, and luckily had found a lot of different people along the way that could kind of help me to understand how to work through the things I was dealing with, and to really understand, uh, the physics of life, I guess. People that could give me the vocabulary to understand, realities, like time, as far as how our consciousness relates to those things. And that's really, those were the tools, like having that vocabulary to really understand myself better. Because when we're experiencing ourselves just as a physical person, we don't really understand that we could be in different realities, or, um, different time frames. And so if you don't have that context to understand yourself in that way, uh, basically a lot of things could be confusing. And those two things really were the most essential for me, especially like the fact that I would never be in my body. I really was always in other realities. And so understanding those deeper mechanics helped me to really start to understand myself. And it's been a long time. Like I didn't just instantly, learn those words. It's really experiential, and having the point of reference of coming more into my body and into this reality, then I could really understand, okay, like this is what was going on with me as a kid. But it's been such a powerful journey to really, understand things not from an emotional level, but really just the logic of what was going on in my life. It's been, um, yeah, an incredible journey.
Wow, what a huge piece in just a nutshell of who you are. So, yeah, wow. Oh my gosh. The biggest thing I was hearing when you were sharing was like, um, among like your rock bottom experiences, if you want to call them that, like there's this sense of like, no one's going to save you but yourself, like no one can do the things that you were searching for or desperately needing to find in yourself. Because the word escape came up several times too, of like, oh my gosh, I wonder if you even knew what you were escaping, or if it was just that flow of like, well, you knew you didn't want to be there, but you knew you could be here, like that flow in and out of like, um, oh my gosh, yeah, what is there to escape? Or what is there? It's like this grass is greener concept, of like, I know I'm here, but what's over there kind of thing. And then another thing that popped up that I got curious about was like, do you know your birth story and just how you entered this world? Because it sounds like the way you entered the world, you were so sensitive, just physically, spiritually, any of those things, emotionally. Yeah, there was so much there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I definitely do consider myself to be sensitive, but one thing that I've really come to understand now at this point, through all the work that I've done, is that when you don't have a solid identity, right, like a solid encapsulation of yourself, of your essence, then you're basically a part of whatever environment you find yourself in. And so that was the situation for me. I didn't have that strong core, a place, an inner resource. I pretty much was just whatever was going on around me. That was me. Um, and so that's why like I never really knew what I liked as a kid. I always tried to like the things that other people liked or the foods that other people liked, or I tried to be who like tried to be who I thought they would like. And I was definitely intuitive enough to really adapt well to people, but it was at the expense of myself as well. But that was just my way of coping, and especially since my family didn't really understand it, and my sister was so present, and she was really independent. Uh, it caused a misunderstanding with them. They didn't really know what was going on with me either. And then, of course, if you don't have like that inner sanctuary, that place of safety within yourself, um, then you really don't feel good ever. And so I didn't have that resource, and so I really didn't feel good a lot. And so I was really always complaining a lot. I was screaming and crying a lot as a kid. And so for my parents just didn't have the resources to even understand what was going on with me or to deal with it. And so I was just really like a problem child, I guess you could say. Like I was perceived that way. And so like all of those things kind of get built into your identity, and you don't really know what's going on either. And so you're saying, what's wrong with me? And the only reflection you have is what's going on around you. And then if you're that disconnected from yourself, like what I've learned now is we think of identity as kind of like these mental concepts or everything. But what I've really learned is it's literally like an energetic space, right, that we have. It's our literally our essence, and that's where we connect with ourself. We get our ideas, our sense of self, where we can really have that to say no, like that's not what's really going on, because we can feel that there's something different. But because I was so much a part of my environment, like I was really sensitive to everybody's emotions, really sensitive to everything going on around me. And then like obviously, like I was saying, I didn't have that connection to myself to realize that there's something else going on. Um, and so yeah, that was like really the biggest challenge, is like coming back into myself and learning how to do that, learning how to set up those boundaries and have that inner sanctuary, have that connection to me, to my essence, that I could really enter the world with and grow and evolve. I think that was also one of the biggest challenges for me with physical things, is I didn't have the part of me that I could take information or experiences with other people and use it to build into myself, use it to grow and evolve. Everything really was just like an obstacle that I couldn't overcome. And then also, I mean, through the experiences that I've had as well, like I still to this day like feel stuff around me all the time. And so that's really another thing too, is like if you don't have um a strong sense of self, like you're gonna be impacted by the things that are around you, right? And um there's been a lot of death around me always, and that was why I was really scared to sleep as a kid, is because I could feel the dead around me and other things around me. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but I mean that's still been something that's been a challenge for me even up until this day, is really like defining myself when you feel things moving around you. But it's, yeah, it's interesting because like that, I've never had that physical basis, so it's always been energy to me, right? Like my body was never something that I was in. So I've always been trying to define myself on an energetic level. Like I just couldn't be in my body. And so to come into it, I've had to really confront all of those things.
Wow. Yeah, the energetic piece is so valuable too. Like, because I imagine if you don't identify with a physical body and you don't um, prefer being like here, it's probably um, like it probably gets to a point where you're like, okay, I don't value this, but like everyone else around me does. And like the piece you're talking about of like fitting in versus like the self-worth of like, oh, wait a minute, how do I redefine this for myself? And how do I set up like energetic boundaries that work for me? Even if it's different from what everyone else is doing.
Totally. Yeah, and it's really interesting because like my my understanding of my own story has evolved so much as I have. Um but yeah, it is really interesting, and it's almost like I didn't have a choice, right? I mean, like that's just the the path that I'm set on because of the way that I came into this world, right? I didn't have an option. I literally couldn't function any other way than having to figure this stuff out. It's the only thing that's really allowed me to build a foundation and like an internal strength to go out in the world and be productive and really do things. But luckily, like it's been an education, and I think it's something, that is really really important, as far as experience wise for what a lot of people are going through, maybe to varying degrees. But the one thing that I've learned is that basically any problem that I've ever had in my life, the solution to it is by connecting, like integrating with your body, right? Defining and stabilizing yourself in this physical reality. um and like literally, uh everything in my life has been resolved that way, and anytime something is off, that's what the solution to it is. And so it's been really interesting, like the different things. Like my mom, I guess you could label, would be like similar to a narcissist type of pattern. But what I've learned about that is that my mom didn't really have an identity either. And what I mean by identity is like a that energetic connection to your essence, right? So she was always out of time and space, not connected to her body. And what I've learned about abuse, about a lot of like relationship dynamics and a lot of things in general, is that we actually stabilize each other into this reality, right? And so like the abuse that I suffered from my mom was just because she was trying to stabilize into this reality, right? And so she was kind of anchoring on to me, but I think I also was like always floating away too. Like I easily could have disconnected from this reality. That's just my pattern. And so like sometimes we have these really painful experiences in relationships with people, but it's actually that we are like stabilizing each other into this reality, which is really really interesting. I mean, that's been like, it's been a really powerful realization because I've had a lot of like victimization patterns throughout my life, because like really frustrated, why me? And when it really gets down to it and you start to understand the deeper mechanics of it, it's like I needed that to stabilize me. It was painful on a physical and emotional level, but now I see that like that I actually had to have that to stay here. um which, yeah, it's very different than I ever would have expected to understand it.
Yeah. And it's reminding me too about how like this new lens of like trauma is not a mental health disorder. And like just where addiction comes into that too. It's like, what we believe about childhood trauma or even, yeah, the ways we've been treated. Um, it's not that it makes it okay, or kind of how you're saying, like, yes, it's a necessary piece of the puzzle or was of your path. But I feel like now too, especially like there's just more and more awareness around it. And then I think you nailed it when you said the ownership and the accountability of, wait a minute, what's my role in this? Like, was I equally a part of the equation? Like what was my role, even if I was the victim, or, like being able to identify with the role you're playing without maybe identifying with it personally, or coming back to like your essence. And yeah, I would love to hear how you feel about the mental health, that kind of stuff too, because it's kind of crazy, like people who struggle and people who suffer, right? Or aren't able to maybe evolve in a way to like have more awareness. Yeah, how would you help them or give them support?
Yeah, well, so that's really the thing that I've learned too is like yes, I've struggled with mental illness, mental instability, like addiction, all of those things. And literally, like I was saying, the solution to all of it is really like being able to connect to your body, like to reality, because when we're not connected to our body, like we're affected by the emotions of other people around us, like our environment, things that happen in our life, like we just don't have any strength or resource. Literally the only resource that we can have is our internal self, right? And like some people are just naturally connected to themselves, and so they handle those things properly and move forward. And when they're looking at somebody that's struggling like that, it's easier to label it with something rather than say like, oh, they're out of time and space, like they're not connected into this reality, or they don't have a strong definition of self energetically, right? Because we can't see those things, like we only see the physical, and so it's really hard to understand that, oh, that's actually what's going on. But I would say like with all of those issues in my life, like firstly starting with the addiction, as soon as I realized like who I really was and I felt that essence of myself, that's like the moment that drugs lost their value to me, because I realized like this is what I was always looking, and drugs didn't even come close to it. So now it's like I could go use drugs again, but it's not going to get me there. And now I had a new thing that I was seeking. And at that time, like it wasn't even about overcoming addiction. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I need. What I've always been missing in my life. Um, and then like so overcoming mental illness, depression, all of those things, literally it's about coming into your body. It's about redefining yourself, right, in this reality. And um yeah, that's really resolved everything for me, and it's allowed me to connect with other people and have relationships where people can see me and I can connect with them and I can be myself. I know what I uh like I don't have bad relationships anymore. And like another really interesting thing that I've been noticing recently too is that I've really like had so many of these um like so-called negative traits, or like aspects of the old paradigm, like greed and jealousy, like all of these things, like but expressed in like a bad way, because I do also believe that there's like a positive version of all of those things, like we can use those tendencies in ourselves positively, but like in the bad way, right? Like if you look at like people like a Hitler, or people that have had like these really um just they've been done bad things, right? And I realized that the thing that was driving me to do all these things, or to like want to put myself above others, or all of this, was because literally I didn't have that connection to myself. And like so it's really interesting to experience all of those aspects of the world, like what the world is struggling with these days. It's really interesting to experience how I was expressing those things, and I don't consider myself a person that would want to take advantage of anybody else. But because I didn't have that connection to myself and that internal nourishment, it led me to want to do those things, like not consciously, but then you like start doing them and you're like, holy shit, why am I doing that? Right. And like any time that I've had those patterns, it's because I'm disconnected from myself, right? And so then you like have to put yourself above others to feel okay, or you think you do, right? But even though it doesn't resolve that, but it's so interesting that like everything, as far as I've discovered in this life, everything, it's all about bringing your essence into this physical reality. Um,
Wow. My head is exploding. And like, it's so real. Like, something else I thought of as you were sharing was like our shadow, and how like everyone's always like, own your shadow, look at the darkness, go lean into the discomfort, right? And it's like, but what about owning our light too? Like, can we own our light? And, like, I almost feel like owning our light helps us own our shadow and helps us integrate those shadow pieces that we're not willing to. Because I feel like in society, we're still in a place of fear and power and control and like overwhelmingly indecisiveness of what we want and how we want that to look. I feel like it's so much easier to say, oh, this is the way it is. That's how it goes, versus to say, wait a minute, like, what if we have the power to do something different that aligns with who we are? And like, what if we could lift each other up, stick up for each other, Um, like, I just wonder how we'll shift from this like very narrow focus of, climbing to the top versus like, whoa, what if we could get further from lifting each other up, and like reflecting with others and showing others their value too. Um, but yeah, like the shadow piece is huge in all of
Totally. Yeah, that's such good insight too. And I mean, that's like really the challenging part, right? Is like, especially when you have this deflated sense of self, it's so hard to embrace our shortcomings on top of that because we don't have the strength to say, to like not allow that to make us have an even more diminished sense of self, right? But that's kind of the polarity. And like, that's the interesting thing too about like light and dark. And I think that a lot of things like in the spiritual community or even in life in general is like you're running away from the dark towards the light, right? And we have this perception of like we want to get to the light, and definitely like for me it took seeing my light to be able to have even the strength to move forward and say, oh my gosh, like I can do this stuff because I see what's at the end of it, right? I see the potential I have, and that's worth it to me to go through whatever I have to go through. And luckily I didn't see all of it at the time because it still would have been too overwhelming, I think. But like luckily like it's been kind of piece by piece, and then I hit a new point and like I see the next step of work that there is. If it had all hit me at once, I think it would have just buried me. But the thing that I've really learned in my journey is that it's not about going towards the light or away from the dark, because that puts you off center too. Like the light and the dark, they're really just like points of reference. They help us to balance, right? We're not trying to go from one or the other. We're trying to stabilize in the middle. And so it really is about like honoring both, right? And we have to kind of figure out how to integrate, um, and just kind of come into that center point of like, I guess you could call it like neutrality, of really balancing yourself between the light and the dark, and not valuing one over the other. But another interesting thing that you had said is like, how do we come to a point where we realize that what is in the best interest of me is in the best interest of everybody else? And I think that that's really like what we need to resolve all of the issues we have in our society right now, right? Like everything that we do is basically like self-accumulation, right? And so that concept in and of itself, it like inspires competition. And that's really like at the source of everything I think we're dealing with, is like someone needs to get more than the other person, right? And then we value our sense of self like off of like how much of that stuff we've accumulated, right? And then it's like competition. We don't want to stop and help the other person. And like that's another kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was saying like I've noticed all of those characteristics of like the old paradigm, which we're still like physically expressing for sure. The consciousness is changing, but we're still stuck in that physical reality. But I've noticed all of those things in myself, right? I've seen all those qualities, I've acted them out. And like literally the more and more that I connect to myself, like integrate, right? The more and more I integrate my essence, my timeless self with my body, like the more I come to realize that, the more I come into a reality, a consciousness where what's in my best interest is in the best interest of everybody else. Like there's nothing that I could do that would take advantage of another person that would benefit me, right? And you like, so we come into that place of oneness with ourself, and then we really start to see like what's in my best interest is in the best interest of everybody else, and you start to really connect to that part of you that's no different than anybody else. Like we're literally all made from the same stuff, right? So like we all really are part of one giant organism, just like our body is comprised of all these different bacteria and living organisms that make up us, right? We're like that on a different scale to like something grander than we are. And so yeah, it's just like it the more that I realize and experience the depth of it and how it's transformed me personally, I realize that that's like a solution for so many different things that we're experiencing in our lifetime, um, as far as like, you know, externally. So it's really, really profound. Uh, yeah. Oh, and another thing that you were talking about too is like, how do we how do we lift each other up? And I think that there's so many nuances in there too, which is really, really interesting, because just like with ourselves, right? We don't want to beat ourselves up. We won't move forward. But we also don't want to like be too accepting of our shortcomings to like get allow ourselves to get stuck in them. So it's really like this fine line of how do we like work with each other properly. We're like, we're not like allowing each other to become stuck, but we're also like, we are honoring the beauty and like the intelligence and brilliance in each other. And so like, I don't think it's any mental like concept that we can conceive of where we apply the right rule in the right situation, right? But I think that once we all really commit to like becoming that best version of ourselves, we wouldn't allow anybody else around us to stagnate, right? Like we could like, it forces us to figure out how to interact with each other properly, right? If we're like being too accepting and supportive of somebody, and then they get kind of stuck, like it'll start to weigh down on you, and you'll realize I need to do something different for me, but it'll help this person move forward. So it's like, kind of how do we like come into that integrity of really like, yeah, that space of what's in the best interest, and how do we lift each other up? Like how do we honor each other and love each other, but then like how do we lift each other up and like help each other push through those challenges that we're facing? Like how do we push each other to become our most authentic self, and like, you know, not cling to those things that aren't serving us.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to like put our like current selves at bay in order to like entertain this future version of ourselves of like, okay, like if we can pull together the things that will be good for us then now, but like convince ourselves now that it's like a good thing to do, you know, like I think about if we could slow down enough to know each other, you know, it's like think of all the strangers you come in contact with every single day, whether it's at the store, whether it's like walking down the street or in passing, like it's like I try to remind myself like every single person that I cross paths with, or every person that's meant to be in the same moment as me in that moment, it's like they have a real life story. They're a real life person. But like, think about it. It's like you could be at the airport or on an airplane and you're just like, yep, I'm just rubbing elbows with like another person. But like, you don't, like, in a way, you can give a lot to it. And in another way, it's like, yep, they're just another person. But I just wonder if we slowed down enough, or if we, because we're so busy all the time, but if we had the time to like get to know people and get to know their stories. And it's kind of how you're sharing your story today. It's like, what if our individual story was like the ticket, or did have the power, or, you know, like was some sort of like bridge to helping others and like connecting with others in order for like us to deepen with ourselves, kind of how you say like your relationship to your story evolves over time. Like, you know, I think about just people that I know too that are like no, I don't think, I don't think my story would help anyone, or no, I don't think I want to like share that, or, it's like there's so many like present moment things that kind of like can prohibit us or like stop us from entertaining who we could be, or because we could really do anything we want. We're just limited by our beliefs and our patterns and our stories that we continue to confirm. And sometimes we have inspiration and breaks that break those walls down, like break down the walls of fear. But yeah, it's so fascinating um, to keep that in mind of like, yeah, how do we continue to like connect with people and continue to propel ourselves too while building that community.
Totally. Yeah, and I think like what you're saying, like seeing that future possibility, like that's really what opened up for me the opportunity to, do the work, to put in the work to get to where I'm at now, but also like where I'm headed. And it was really like I don't think I ever would have mustered the strength to do that had I not seen the possibilities of who I could become, of and also of like what this reality could be like. Like that was also a part of it, as I was experiencing like what this reality could be like, right? And the state of being that I could be in. And for me that was really important, right? It like gives you something that you're like, I mean, it was so amazing. Like I would do anything to get there, right? Just like I was like chasing highs with drugs, and I would do anything to get like the best drugs to like feel that high, that elusive thing. Like now it's like, no, like I see the perfection of what I could become, and like I know the potential of what this reality could be like you were saying, with that connection with each other, right? And like um and then another cool thing you were talking about is like the evolution of like I had said, the evolution of my own story, but the value of everybody's story. And I think that that's really such an important thing to connect to, because it's like we all have these challenges that we're dealing with. We all have this our own unique perspective of life, right? And so our challenges, if we choose to overcome them, lead to that wisdom, to those gifts, whatever it is that it'll bring to us to be able to offer to the rest of the world, right? Because no one's like, we're all experiencing similar things, but nobody's experiencing it in exactly the way you are. Nobody would express it in exactly the way you would. And so I think that that's really like, I mean, for me it's like, I didn't have like like I didn't go to college and learn a trade. Like mine has been so simplified for me to see that, the value in that, because like mine is all about resolving the challenges that I've had just to be able to even really like participate here. But I think for a lot of people too, that they go and they like study something in school, but there's so many different factors into what we're experiencing in life. And I think that anybody that chooses to like take that accountability and responsibility to engage in life, to overcome their challenges, they'll come out with this beautiful gift for the other people around them. Like that interesting like perspective that they bring, that helps us all to come to a greater truth and realization.
Heck yes. Oh my gosh. It's making me think of like these three questions that kind of relate to like mind, body, soul. It's like, what do I think I want? What do I feel I want? And what do I know I want? And like the open-ended questions like that can be, for me, sometimes so challenging, because it pushes me up and into myself of, okay, what do I think I want? Okay, what do I feel I want? What do I know I want? And then I might write that down and I'm like, is that what I really want? Like this power of choice of like I can cultivate and create anything. And how you so wisely said, if I choose to overcome, what I've been presented with, like there's such a choice in that. And sometimes we're not really empowered with that choice. It's more so of that victim stance of I have to, or these are the cards I was dealt, or things like that. um and so yeah, to have power and choice and like discernment to say, wait a minute, I can have what I want, or I can start by like dreaming up what it is that I think I want, like our hopes, our dreams, how we want things to be, how we want the world to look. Like there's even days where I'm like, yeah, what would this actually look like in real time? And then just like challenging myself to like create that because it's so out there. It can be. It can feel like so far away, even though like we do have the power to bring it to the now.
Totally. Yeah, that's such a cool thing to think about. And like really I think that it's something that probably is like a shared vision, right? Like we all have our perception of what it is, and we're all here really to bring that about. And I think that the more integrated we come, the more we evolve as individuals. Like we come into this collective space that might be like really similar once we all get to a certain point with ourselves. Like what we want to bring in that shared vision will become more and more in line with each other, right? Which is, I think, is really cool to think about too. Like as we move forward and we come to a deeper understanding of ourselves, and thus like everything else, um, will come to a reality where like we all create this amazing thing together.
Yeah. Yeah, like peeling away the layers. It's like the metaphor of the onion. It's like everybody has, a different amount of layers. Everybody has to peel away a different amount of, however many layers that they need to shed to be in alignment. Um, yeah, it's also reminding me of this new term that I heard called economy of generosity, and just how like it's almost this idea of like passing on a good deed, like the pay it forward movement of like doing something nice for a stranger. But yeah, like this like new economy of generosity of like, yeah, how can we see the greatness in people, or how can we like give people the benefit of the doubt even in like a heavy, dark, confused world.
Totally. And I think that the key for that is that we like stop seeing everything as like commodities, right? Or um like we don't have time to stop and try to help each other, because like we're trying to gather things, right? And I think like once we come to see that the most important thing is that contribution of each individual, like they have something that we all need. We all really need each other, and like that's, we're all part of that whole. And I think like through my own journey I've really realized like it's transitioned from like what do I need, what's best for me, that was like wasn't in alignment with what was best for everybody else. Like the more that I've like come into completeness with myself, then I don't like need things in that same way anymore, and then like the things that I actually need and want are becoming more and more aligned with what's best for other people. And I think like that's kind of the same thing as like what we have the potential for in the future, is that like what the reality that we want to see created, or that ultimate dream of ourselves, as we pursue it and evolve as an individual along the way, like we'll end up getting to where we thought we were going, and it's going to look completely different than what we thought it was at the beginning. And then all of a sudden we realize like, wow, my dream, my vision for myself like really is a vision for everybody, right? Like it has this incredible like gift for all of us that is mutually beneficial. And I think that like as we like come more face to face with our own stuff, like as individuals and collectively with all these systems that are failing right now, like we're gonna start to reevaluate what holds value. And the physical things like we've put so much into that, right? Like having the nice cars or the high paying job, and we've really tried to value ourselves that way. But I think as we are forced to come to a deeper realization about ourselves and about this reality, we're going to really start to realize like the only thing that really holds value is our essence. And then once we realize how much essence our own value has, we realize that like while we have our own unique flavor, that essence of someone else is also a part of us too. Like, you know, not in the like keeping good boundaries, but like they're a part of the same thing that we are, right? And if ours holds the that's the most valuable thing, like then that's also the most valuable thing, right? And so then we have a shared mission together, right? Share like we all become one gigantic family. And like why would we ever let someone in our family suffer? Like why would we ever just like step over somebody who's our family member, like as we're on our way to do something that's far more important and they're sitting there suffering, right? Like once we come to realize that like yeah, we're born into different families, like physically we're all part of one big family. And then, you know, once we start to approach life in that way, everything shifts, right? Because when you really realize what holds value and what really nourishes you, like it's, you know, you'll never find it outside of you.
Yeah, so beautiful. Yeah, it's almost like when everyone's at an equal playing field, we get to really see each other. You know, it's like when we build up these barriers, it's so much easier to like either fly under the radar or be, yeah, skipped over and like missed. And like, you know, we know this can happen fast. It doesn't have to take long. It can happen quickly. And it's like coming back to self. Like, let's get out of the way of ourselves. Let's change ourselves so we have this resource to share with others and to like support and help others. um but yeah, that was so beautifully said about how we are a family. How could we not be?
Yeah, yep, we all are made of the same stuff. We just look different on the outside. And I think, and I mean, yeah, like I think that the more and more that people start to make those realizations, then things will start changing faster and faster, right? Like it'll just spread exponentially, like the more people that really come into that space and can remind other people of that and like speak those words of truth that like resonate deeply inside of us, right? When you hear the truth like that, it like you know, like people say you feel it in your bones, or it like tingle, you know, gives you that tingling sensation. And it just like it changes the the energy of that person, right? It like awakens something in them and they start to say, that's right. Like I remember that, because on some level we all know that, right? It was like you were saying earlier, it's like all of these things that prevent us from really seeing that in ourselves. But I think that the more and more people start to awaken to that and they really go out there and start creating whatever it is they create from a space that's more from that space, like even if you're creating products, it's like infused with your essence like that, and it awakens people, like even if it's something that you would think has nothing to do with that, like a, I don't know, a pen or a piece of art, like whatever it is, like whatever we do in this world, if we infuse it with that essence, it literally like awakens people no matter what it is that we do with ourselves. And so I think like we'll see this at some point, I'm not sure when, but this exponential explosion of just like beautiful things coming into the world. um yeah.
Most certainly. Oh my gosh, wow, this has been such a treat to have a conversation with you today. And would you like to tell people where they can find you, or if they want to learn more about your offerings and, yeah, how they can get to know what you're putting out into the world?
Sure, that would be awesome. So I'm actually doing a monthly meditation program right now where I basically teach you like how to come into your body, how to connect into this reality. Also, it works on developing your imagination, which is our creative power, which I think is like so sad that as kids we're like told that it's just imaginary, right? But it's so real. Like we can literally shift our state of being, we can change everything in our life through our imagination, and it starts there. So it's really about connecting to your power, which is coming into your body, right? We can't be connected to our power source without being connected to our body. Um, Building up your imagination, basically teaching you the tools to be able to, become your best self and create whatever it is you want in this life. So I have a monthly meditation program. I also do one-on-one sessions, but you can find all of my information at www.nickfruth.com. And yeah, I'd love to connect if anybody resonates with what I've said today. I have like a free consultation where we can kind of go over what the process I would take you through, what my offerings are. Yeah, so love to connect with anybody that thinks that they could benefit from it.
So, so cool and so powerful. Yeah, you guys do not want to miss this. So, thank you again, Nick, for coming. This was such a treat and
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
it was a beautiful day.
Yeah, thank you. It's always great to hang out with you.
Likewise.